Hello, this is Priscilla Rice, and I'm coming to you from Live Oak Recording Studio. This week, we're going to have a rebroadcast of one of our earlier classic podcasts. We hope you enjoy it, and thanks so much for listening. Episode 122, The Strength of Your Anchor.
You're listening to the official BNI podcast with BNI founder and chairman, Dr. Ivan Misner. Stay tuned for networking and referral marketing tips from the man who's been called the father of modern networking, along with suggestions and insights into getting the most from your membership in the world's largest networking organization, BNI. To be sure you never miss an episode of the official BNI podcast, subscribe at the iTunes Music Store or right on our homepage at bnipodcast.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the official BNI podcast, which is brought to you by networkingnow.com, which is the leading site on the net for networking downloadables. I'm Priscilla Rice, and I'm coming to you from Live Oak Recording Studio in Berkeley, California. And I'm joined on the phone today by the founder and the chairman of BNI, Dr. Ivan Misner. Hello, Ivan. Where are you and how are you?
I'm doing great, Priscilla, and this week I'm in New Hampshire and Maine visiting BNI groups and doing presentations. There's some great groups up here, and I'm really pleased to be here.
Oh, great. Well, what do you have to share with us?
Today I've got a topic that I've written a little bit about. It's called The Strength of the Anchor. This summer, my family took a several-day small ship tour of the Great Barrier Reef. And the first night we noticed that the anchor being used to secure the ship in the middle of the Coral Sea was really small compared to the size of the ship. It was a pretty decent-sized ship. The anchor was really small. The second night we were anchored off Hope Island in the Great Barrier Reef, and there were really strong winds came up, and our captain started the engines, and he backed the ship up, letting out more length of chain to the anchor. And I was really curious and maybe a little bit concerned, and I asked him, how is it possible that such a small anchor will hold the ship in place with winds blowing against it so strongly? And he said, it's the chain that is holding the ship, not the anchor.
Mm-hmm.
After the anchor is lowered, the captain looks to the first mate who signals from the prow which direction the chain's laying on the bottom of the sea, and the captain then maneuvers into the right position and lets out the necessary amount of chain to hold the ship in a particular place at a particular time. Now this night, with the winds growing stronger, he recognized that he needed to let out more chain. And I began to see how this dynamic was really relevant to BNI. Our anchor is the system, the process of doing business the BNI way. But it's not the system or the process that has the strength at all. Or not completely. I mean, clearly it's a powerful process, but it's the length of the chain holding the chapter or the ship, in the metaphor, in place that makes it all come together. As you take a look at your chapter, members who are listening to this podcast, think about the links or relationships you have formed with the individual members in your group. How many links does your chain have? Do you have strong relationships with all the other members in the chapter? Or are you closely linked with some but disconnected and detached from others in your group for whatever reason? So how do you go about letting out more chain during times when the economic winds have strengthened against our business? I submit that it's time to get serious about developing stronger relationships with each and every member of your chapter, even the ones you don't think you have that have contacts that you might want, or perhaps are in a business that's not exactly symbiotic with yours. We talk about forming power teams with those businesses which are closely related to yours, but what do you do about those members whose businesses are totally out of sync with yours, or members who seem to be unable to provide quality referrals to you? Have you done one-to-ones with those members? Spending time to do the one-to-ones with each and every member of your chapter helps you develop a longer and stronger chain. Each person in your chapter is one of the links that lengthens and strengthens that chain. The wisdom of laying down a longer chain to strengthen the ability of the anchor to hold strong is critical for the success of your chapter. Another aspect of this anchoring process is watching the first mate. I thought that was really interesting. your BNI director is trained and qualified to signal your chapter of the direction the chain is lying as the dynamic in your chapter changes. Now, this is really important. The first mate signals, where the chain is going for the captain, and without him, the captain would really, really struggle. And that is your BNI director. They can signal the direction of your chapter and help you if you take their advice. Your chapter president is basically the captain of the chapter, the ship in this metaphor. He or she watches the director for guidance in what adjustments to make to ensure that the chapter is pointed in the right direction. At one point in our anchoring process while at sea, the first mate literally dove into the water.
Wow.
To loosen the chain where it had become hooked on some coral formation. Your director cares about your chapter. As we travel around the world meeting with BNI directors and conducting trainings and conferences, we're both gratified to see the heart of our BNI directors and our presidents and leadership team people and chapter members. And we encourage chapter members to keep their eyes, particularly the director, particularly the chapter president, keep their eyes on the director as he or she signals which adjustments need to be made so that the system works well for the BNI group. I love this metaphor, and I wanted to share it with BNI members today.
It's interesting, especially the idea that the chain rather than the anchor being the most important part, which is just counterintuitive, Yeah,
I had no idea. No idea at all. But when winds really pick up is when they need to lay more chain down, because when I was on the ship the first night, there was not much wind, and it was no big deal. But as the winds really kicked in, they laid more chain down, and they said that's what really helped to grip the bottom. And I'm sitting there listening to that, and I think about BNI, and I put these two things together and talked a lot about it with my wife, Beth, who helped me kind of create this visualization. And I think it's very relevant to BNI, and I'd love education coordinators to share it at BNI meetings.
I just want to make one more comment in terms of the actual group. If you've been in a group for a while, as I have, and you develop a certain number of relationships with people, and then you don't renew them by doing one-on-ones fresh, in a fresh way, or more often than you would have thought to do them, I think you put yourself at a disadvantage.
Yeah, definitely. I think you should probably do a one-to-one with those people, certainly all new people, and all of the people that you want to maintain a strong relationship with no less than once a year. Uh-huh. Less people may think, well, that's not much. But, you got a chapter of 30 members. That could be a lot of one-to-ones. And I'm saying that's a minimum, not a maximum. That's a minimum. You want to meet with those people that you want to create those relationships with, or maintain those relationships with. Right. No less than once a year, one-to-one.
Do you think a party counts?
No, I don't think that's a good one-to-one. But it's a good way of staying in touch with people, absolutely.
Uh-huh. Okay, great. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to share?
No, that's everything today, and I'd love for those of you who've listened to this podcast to leave a message, leave a note on what you think, and particularly if you're taking it back to your chapter, I'd love to hear what your chapter thought. Thanks, Priscilla.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Meisner. Well, I just want to remind the listeners that this podcast has been brought to you by networkingnow.com, which is the leading site on the net for networking downloadables. Thank you so much for listening. This is Priscilla Rice, and we hope you'll join us next week for another exciting episode of the official BNI podcast.